the statements now, and then you'll have time throughout the interview to explain your answer more extensively. Dividend tax is unjustified. Would you say yes or no to that?
No.
No.
Okay.
The Dutch economy can and should do without the gas from Groningen.
Yes.
And the third statement is, the goals set by the Paris Climate Accord are feasible and will be reached.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to the first statement, which was about the commotion concerning the dividend tax repeal. You answered with a no. I would first like to hear your explanation for that.
Yeah, I think if you look at the whole commotion, as you call it, I am missing that there is more discussion about content and data and facts, and there is of course a lot of how do you call it, image. There's a lot of opinions. The newspapers are full.
Every day again.
And it's of course, I think, a very interesting topic to fuel a political debate, and you see that people are tagging onto that. It's a great topic to have all the political parties take profile. The media loves a nice fight. So you see that really fuels the discussion. But I think the real topics or questions I'm sometimes missing, and that's so I can understand the debate, but I think we're having the wrong debate.
Because what's happening, I'll touch upon it shortly. The dividend tax repeal is going to be, or the dividend tax is going to be repealed, and Shell lobbied for this measure quite some time, along other companies as well. And now the debate is whether it should be repealed because no political party actually proposed to repeal it. And some also argue that Shell has a very big political influence. And what would you say is wrong about that discussion?
I think if you do your homework, then you can see that the discussion about dividend withholding tax is already quite old. So you can find it back for nearly 15 years. You can find it back in all kinds of documents from government, of hearings that have been organized by political parties, with all kinds of economists that are looking at the different aspects of it. So for a long time it has been debated. I think our company has been very transparent for that whole time about that we think it is much better to not have dividend withholding tax if you are a big company in the Netherlands like ours. All the companies that are listed on the Amsterdam Exchange, the top companies need more than 90% foreign capital. And therefore attracting that foreign capital is not very easy if you have this tax. So it's been very open, it's been very transparent, and it's not new. So the debate about how did this get into the coalition agreement, of course, it's for some people it was a surprise. But if you know it has been debated for 15 years, if you have read the newspapers last year and have seen what all the companies have struggled with, if you look at what happened to AXO, where RELX, Reed Elsevier, has disappeared to, what is happening with those big companies, you could see that the debate became more urgent. So it's not a surprise, I think. It's been debated for a long time.
So do you then think that opinions like these are exaggerated? Or do you think that they are in some sense then justified and have some stem to them?
Well, I do believe that it's worth for this kind of measure to have a good debate about it. So I don't object that people really look at it, but let them really look at it and do your homework. And I am amazed that if things get said in the media or by politics, from it's a surprise that this happened or that Shell has 2 share structures, then I think it's been out there for 12 years, it's listed every day.
I don't think that's exactly the critique, right? Because people, of course, know that Shell wanted this measure for quite a long time, from 2004 onwards, when the headquarters finally settled in the Netherlands. I feel like, for example, Lilian Marijnense and Jesse Klaver expressed that they thought our politics were sort of in the that Shell could really influence that, and I think that's more of the debate right now.
Yeah. Now, if the debate is about how strong is the influence of Shell and is this transparent, I think we have been very transparent, and we've been saying this for a long time. We've been sharing this view for a long time, saying that the view of Shell is it would be much better to not have the dividend withholding tax. Yeah, we've been open about that. We've been telling that. If we talk about the picture of how we are lobbying, I think that is really exaggerating, and it's really building an image again. I remember the first year I came into this job as director of the Netherlands, there was a debate, it was about something else, also about influence of Shell. And I then got a list of people that visited the ministries, or the organizations visiting the ministries. And as you said, we are the biggest company in the Netherlands, and we were not in the top 30.
Okay,
so I think you know, and we don't have special passes, so we always have to apply for an appointment. It's open, everyone can see when we meet people from government, and they can ask questions about it. And of course we talk to people in ministries and to government, because there's a lot to talk about, like all the others. But I don't think we do this in a different way, or in a way that the image is made of. I don't recognize that, and also not for the dividend withholding tax.
You already mentioned that you think that we are having the wrong debate concerning the dividend tax. What would be the right debate then?
I think the question is not, and that's what I hear a lot in the media, is, oh, this is costing $2 billion. Where else to spend the $2 billion on? What could we do with this money? I understand that question, and I would have an opinion on that as well.
Then what is your opinion on that?
But yeah, I think the question is, the dividend withholding tax is marching out of the country with the companies included. Redex, Elsevier, Axo, parts of Axo are already sold under other ownership. Those people don't pay dividend tax anymore. If Unilever shareholders do not vote for the Netherlands as the headquarters, Unilever will not pay dividend tax. So it's not a question what to do with the money. The question is, there has been said by the large companies, there's a risk that the dividend withholding tax is disappearing with the company. Do you want to take that risk and say, you know, I take the risk and I will leave it intact and I'll see if the companies disappear? Or do you let that happen? And then I think that the contribution of these big companies to the Netherlands is much bigger than only the sum of money you get with the dividend tax.
So I think that we can now conclude that you think that the commotion around the repeal is actually unjustified.
I think the debate is okay. We should have a debate in the Netherlands, but I think we should have the right debate, and the right debate should be what is important for our economy. Is that to keep these companies here or not?
This is someone took the emergency exit probably, and then this alarm goes off. So
well, I think it is now time to move to an audience question. Please do keep in mind that we will talk about Groningen and the energy transition later, and you will also then have the opportunity to ask questions about those topics then. So for now, please, I'd like to ask whether there are any questions to Ms. van Loon.
I see a question over here, maybe. Like the woman in the pink shirt.
Hi. You say large companies would disappear from the Netherlands. It has a bit of a threatening touch to me when I listen to it. Can you say from the bottom of your heart that this tax issue is not in the end targeting on financial gainings of a certain group?
I think that the question really is about, if you look at the large companies we have in the Netherlands and the multinationals, they can only exist because of foreign capital. We have too little national capital in the Netherlands available. Our country is so successful in international trade. You have so many big companies that they actually are doing their business with foreign capital. That foreign capital wants to be used in a very efficient way. That's the way shareholders work. They just look at, okay, is this the best investment? If you then look at the choices of big companies and read the newspapers, look at the debate that Unilever is in, Axo is in, other companies are in, then although they have shareholders that want to invest in the company, those shareholders have an opinion of the efficiency, the capital efficiency of that company, and therefore the debate can be that it would be more attractive for them to move the headquarters. And that would be a gain of 15% to the shareholders, certainly. But in the end, to the Netherlands, we can say we don't like that debate, but if we lose the company and the dividend withholding tax, we actually lose the jobs, we lose the indirect investments of these companies, which have made our Dutch economy as strong as we know it today. So the choice is not if we like that this money is reducing or disappearing. The choice is, do you let the companies go with this debate, or do you take that risk, or do you say, I will make it more attractive for these companies and their shareholders to stay in the Netherlands? And yeah, we are the biggest dividend payer in the world as Shell, already for a century, and we get the signals of our shareholders that if they look at this, similar to Unilever, Axo, other big companies, dividend withholding tax is not an attractive measure in the Netherlands.
So if I understand correctly, you say it's to the benefit of the entire Dutch society and not specifically the big companies itself, right?
Yeah. It is, I mean, and it is a shareholder issue, so it's not something that we get on our balance sheet. It has to do with our shareholders, but it's a financial measure. But in the end, as a Dutch society, I think we need to take the best decision for the Netherlands, and that's why the debate is welcome. And I really have the view that the best decision for the Netherlands is to hold on to big multinationals that mean a lot for our direct jobs, our indirect jobs, our innovation capability, and all the spin-offs of having those players here in our country.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Are there any other questions in the room?
We can maybe ask like other alternatives, like that's the question that rises from the audience.
There has been, because it has been debated already for so long, there has been a lot of discussions about alternatives. And if you look at the hearing, for example, and the documents late last year, I believe it was, with the parliament, you can find a lot of documents on that. And actually there are no alternatives to take this problem away other than to abolish the tax.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we can now move on to the next topic, and we will get another round of audience questions later on. The next topic was indeed Groningen. The statement was the Netherlands or the Dutch economy can and should do without the gas from Groningen. And of course, it has recently been decided that we will stop sourcing from Groningen from 2030 onwards. Why the 12 more years? I think that that's a question that arises very often.
Yeah, I think the statement is made is we're going to stop it as soon as possible. And the outlook is that this will happen around 2030. But I think all parties are working together to see how you can do this as fast as possible. That's not just up to only the Ministry of Economic Affairs or ExxonMobil or Shell. It also has to do with how fast the users of that gas can switch to alternatives. But I think all parties are working hard on making that happen and making sure that therefore the uncertainty for the people in Groningen which is related to the seismicity that is linked to the production, is taken away as fast as possible. So the 12 years is an estimate at the moment of what we need as all parties to get that transition going.
So if it all works out perfectly fine, then it could be that it's even earlier. That's because it's an estimate, like it can be earlier.
It's an estimate, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and I mean, so you say that it takes another 12 more years because you want all of the parties to cooperate? Or?
If you look at what is needed, because the Groningen field is really delivering most of our energy in the Netherlands. We know that as citizens. If you take a hot shower in the morning, then most of the Dutch people have a cv-ketel, a boiler, that runs on a natural gas, and that's coming mostly from Groningen. We make our dinner on it, but also the industry processes are working on that gas. A lot of our electricity is still generated with that gas. So to find alternatives, now everyone would like those alternatives to be as sustainable as possible.
Yeah.
So you need renewable electricity to back this up.
Yeah.
And for renewable electricity, we don't need only solar panels on houses, we need a lot of offshore wind.
Yeah.
If we can't do it with renewable electricity, we need to do it with other forms of energy. Now, in the Netherlands, we still use coal. We still have some gas ourselves. What will be the alternative? Now, that whole puzzle will need to be laid to determine how fast we can move in that 12 years. So citizens need to cooperate, large industries need to cooperate, and we also need to make choices of how to fill the gap between renewable electricity and what else is needed.
So that's also part of the energy transition, and we will touch upon that later onwards.
It's very linked in the supply and demand question.
Yeah, because we have the demand in the Netherlands, and that's now partly supplied by the gas from Groningen, if I understand correctly, and we need to find another way to supply it if we get rid of the gas from Groningen.
Yes.
Then concerning the damages that are caused by this gas extraction, the NAM, the joint venture of Shell and ExxonMobil, is responsible for these damages and has also expressed that they will be. If the NAM cannot fulfill its obligations, then you already said during an interview with Eva Jinek that Shell will be responsible.
I recognize the pipe. It's
we see it happening. Mind the pipe. Yeah.
It's used a lot.
Okay. Let's continue with the question. What happens to the damage after 2030? Like we have this deadline, this estimate, 2030.
Well, I think
it's good that we have all these opinions shared, and thank you for bringing this pipe. But let's keep it a debate. So if you have a question, you can later answer it. Ask it. Okay.
Yeah, your question was what happens after the
2030.
gas production is stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it will remain that the responsibility for paying all the damages will be the responsibility of the producers. So
that's the case in 2031, the case in 2040.
So and if you read again the agreement that we have made with the government, and you see back that is clearly spelled out there.
Yeah.
Now, how that is put in details, it might differ between the full production years, the years after, but the responsibility is very clearly laid, and that will always be backed up by the shareholders.
And what are those details then? Like exactly, like how does it depend on what kind of an earthquake it is, the magnitude?
No. Okay. That's not. Whatever damages, I think that's very clear. Whatever the damage is, or the strengthening that is required, which is still something in the next few years for us to get our heads around.
Yeah.
We have said the government is now in charge. The government is at the steering wheel.
Yeah.
They're going to determine what's going to happen, both in production, in the damage repair decisions, and in the strengthening, and it will all be paid by the shareholders.
Okay, I think that's quite also a relief, like that it's spelled out again.
Yeah, I think it was really, and if I may, it
Yeah.
was
Yes,
really
of course.
necessary to have that kind of clarity.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
we have learned in the last few years that the debate about both what production, but also what to repair, what not to repair, how much to strengthen, is so complex. It seems very simple if you're just a newspaper reader from Amsterdam or from The Hague. But I think if you really get into it, there are quite complex choices to be made. So I think it's very good that the government and the local authorities are taking here the responsibility and are saying we're going to help to make those choices, and that it's also very clear that the bill is being picked up by the shareholders.
But the responsibility is not only, of course, the government, but also the NAM and Shelf, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, the responsibility. Yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
response, like
But
the
the
shares,
steering, the decisions are being made now by the government. So the
Okay.
minister instructs
Yeah.
on all these elements, and the NAM is just an operator that needs to listen to the instructions
Yeah.
and pay the bills. And I think
Yeah.
that's also what the people in Groningen have asked for.
I think that's now clear, and that's good that we have mentioned it again. I think it's time to move to the audience to see if there are any questions concerning what we have talked about so far. So keep in mind that we will discuss the energy transition later, and we will then also have room for questions. So are there any questions so far?
I see.
Maybe over there. I don't.
I see a
There.
question.
If I understood you correctly, the damages will be paid after 2030.
Yes.
What about the people whose houses are basically leaking right now because of, well, the damages that your company caused? Isn't it a bit unfair?
Yeah, no, if there is any damage, and all damage that is related to the production of the Groningen gas, all that have to do with seismicity, are all paid for by the shareholders, whatever that damage is. And even we talk about physical damage, but sometimes it's also not physical damage, but the mental stress, there are cases about that as well. There are cases about people that want to sell their house, even if the house is not damaged by earthquakes, but they feel they are trapped in the market. All that is part of the agreement that we have closed with the government. Yeah.
Are there any other questions concerning the gas in Groningen? I see a
I
question
see-
over there, especially, which is nice because they thought that there's no discussion. So I think it's nice to have a discussion then.
I think you have a question about Groningen. You in the middle, or?
Yes, I do indeed. Thank you. Not only the people of Groningen are suffering from the extractive industry of Shell. We've seen visits in Groningen from activists all over the world. I was there when people from Standing Rock visited. I know that people from West Africa, from Nigeria visited as well. Shell is implicated in the murder of activists in Nigeria. They're under investigation now by Italy and its public prosecutor. When will Shell get rid of the people in the board and in other top functions of Shell that have been implicated in the murder of these Nigerian activists, for instance, by promoting death squads and helping them with Shell helicopters?
Yeah, I realize that there are many topics that you can discuss. This is not Groningen, but we are an international company, and we are present in a lot of countries. Nigeria is a big debate. It's a complex country. Can I ask who has been to Nigeria? Anyone been to Nigeria?
I've had the pleasure of
Yeah?
having visitors from Nigeria tell me these stories.
Yeah. Okay, you've heard it firsthand. No, I can understand. But I've been traveling to Nigeria as well, and I think a lot of people that have traveled abroad understand that sometimes a country is very complex. And in Nigeria, we are working very hard with authorities, but also with international organizations to address the complexity there. We have a quite transparent governance on how to tackle these problems, how to make steps forward. I'm not the one saying it's easy in that country, but we're really trying to do our best to make those steps visible. I think there's a lot of discussion about it. I can't really get into the discussions about accusations because sometimes there are court cases running and then you can't really comment on it openly. So yes, it's a difficult country. I do believe we are doing the best we can. We are a company that is run by a very strict code of conduct and ethical conduct, and we try and apply that everywhere where we do business.
Okay, I hope that answered your question.
Force the people that are responsible for these murders to step down. We saw ING take responsibility by dismissing one of its financial officers responsible last week. I think it's one of the best things you can do. Just get rid of the people that are responsible for those murders.
I think if you are interested about the special case that you are referring to, there is very clear information for other people on the audience. It's very lengthy, so I won't repeat it here, but there's a lot of information that we have made openly available of what happened, what we did, what actions we took, and how we are moving forward on this. And I really believe that we were as saddened by the events as yourself, and we are trying to take the best steps there. I can't really get into the details of a specific case, and I don't agree with the allegations being made already now towards the company. But yeah, I can only ask you to go into the documentation that's available around the specific cases, and further I can't really comment on that.
Okay, I think it's now time to move on to the last topic that we're going to discuss, which is, as I mentioned before, the energy transition. And the statement was, the goals of the Paris Agreement are feasible and will be reached. You answered a yes to that.
And I think the most important thing that has to be discussed first is, of course, your Sky scenario, which you published, in which, for the people that don't know yet, the Sky scenario is basically where Shell outlines its aims and ambitions for the energy transition. And it states that by 2050, the CO2 emissions are to be halved. And then by 2070, those emissions will be at zero.
And
you
net zero emissions.
Yeah, net zero emissions. And also you stated that you will invest 1 to 2 billion euros in green energy, alongside 25 billion euros in the regular business. Now, the question in this scenario, this also includes negative emissions, which you'll have to capture from the sky and then trap underground. Now, my question to you is, why has this option been chosen above complete prevention of emissions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, first of all, a scenario is a scenario. It describes a possible future, thinking about all kinds of demographic and possibilities, and then tries to come up with a credible scenario. Our Sky scenario is the result of modeling capability that we developed for many years, trying to develop models to test our business assumptions. The Sky scenario has been tested by parties like the MIT, and the MIT has concluded that it is in line with the Paris assumptions of reaching 1.75 degrees C. It does have certain assumptions, and you can always debate, are these assumptions then really true? Is this what's going to happen to the world? We don't know. It's the assumptions we can see as a credible scenario. So we've said in our strategy, so sky scenario is a scenario. It's different than our strategy. In our strategy, we've said we will move in line with society. If that moves faster, then we can move faster. If it moves slower, we will be hindered by that because society then therefore does not value climate change as much as we thought. So we will move in line with society. Coming back to the scenario, what are the assumptions underneath this scenario? Why do I believe it's still ambitious? If you look at the Paris Agreement, which was signed by the national leaders, then all these countries have gone back and they have national defined contributions. They've set themselves as a country targets. Now, these national defined contributions, or NDCs, are quite ambitious, and if you look at where we are today, we are very much lagging behind still. But we hope, like in the Netherlands, we are now getting with energy agreement ambitious, but we hope that all the countries are speeding up and meeting those national contributions as they set in Paris. The Sky scenario agrees, the Sky scenario is built on meeting the NDCs in all countries in the world, then having more ambitious NDCs in the next round of Paris leaders, and then going to a normative scenario where we're saying we need to reach that target of below 2 degrees. You can say, is that enough? Why does the whole world not go to a normative scenario and is driven by climate change? That's an assumption. We might want to have that. We might personally want to say we believe that's necessary, and a lot of people do it. Will this happen throughout the world?
I think, there is some statement, invest in education, not fossil fuel.
Different topic.
I think if we get back to the question, because I understand how this scenario came about, and that you're trying to keep it in line with the agreement that has been made, which is of course ambitious, but that's necessary to be ambitious on this field. Why is Shell then investing so much in the carbon capture and storage, in which you still have the emissions, but then get them underground instead of like the complete prevention of emission?
I would just like to say that that Room for Discussion is a platform where we value discussion, but I think that this discussion needs to be have constructively, and I'd like to ask you to be quiet. I think we should just continue with the discussion now.
I don't know what's happening, but
I haven't seen it too, but okay. The question.
Yeah, you were talking about how do you invest? So I think if you look at the scenario, then and the strategy of Shell, it has some major implications on the kind of activities that we need in the world and the kind of activities that we need as Shell.
Okay, if I may interrupt you guys, I understand you have your opinions. You want to express that by means of these statements. What we try to do here is have this discussion about the energy transition, the things. Well, what I'm trying to ask you is that if you continue to talk through it, then we don't get to the answer. So I would please. Well, let us continue. We'll get back to the audience. Then you have, again, room to ask your own questions. So if we could please continue with the interview, that would be highly appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, let's get back to the question again.
About carbon capture, in the Sky scenario. I think if you look at the assumptions of the scenario, and again, I'm saying it's one scenario, then the assumptions are looking at what happens internationally. The assumptions of the Sky scenario are that we are going to get far more efficient with using energy. It's 40 to 50% more energy efficiency. And we are going to...
I would just like to repeat that if you do not wish to enter this discussion or at least listen to both sides of the discussion, then I kindly request you to leave, because I think as Room for Discussion, we are a platform that tries to offer and highlight both sides of the debate, and I think it is important that we listen.
Let us then.
Let us then. You're not letting us ask critical questions, and then if
Okay, if we can just continue, that would be great. Capture and storage instead
so
of
if you look at the scenario and you find that on the website, you see that there are some assumptions around it, and assumptions are ambitious on improving energy efficiency.
Yeah.
But there are also assumptions that for developing countries, we will let them grow in their well-being and their welfare. If you then package that, then you can see that if you allow developing countries still to get out of poverty, that you need at the back end of the scenario indeed negative emissions. These are not negative, these are negative emissions from using biomass and then capturing the CO2 and putting that underground. I must say here that we're now getting in the debate of, very tens of years ahead, so it is very difficult to estimate what will happen at that moment in time. It's a scenario, again, as we say, and for energy transition, I find it important that we get going now, so that we start not losing a lot of energy and a lot of cooperation in the debate, is it 2050 or 2060? We have a job on our hands here in the Netherlands. We're lagging far behind, and we need to cooperate, all parties, to get going and to make sure that we make energy transition happen. And only when we start doing it, we will learn how the future will look like.
And I mean, just to look into the future once more, one thing that really surprised me when I looked at the Sky scenario is that the prediction is that by the beginning of the 22nd century, we'll still be using oil and gas. How do you then balance this? How do you balance this measure then? If we'll still use oil and gas, but also renewable energy.
I think if you, and again, we're looking far ahead in the future. If you look at the transition path, we can all imagine, and certainly here in the Netherlands, that use of electricity will quickly come from sustainable sources. And we know that we can do that. And I hope that by 2030 that job is done. But it's not only about changing the current electricity use, it's also about changing the other energy use and changing our feedstock. It's not only about energy and fuel, it's also changing feedstock from non-fossil, or from fossil to non-fossil. If you then predict what happens over the whole globe, in all countries, every country in their own pace, with their own economy and their own challenges, then we believe that there will be places on Earth and products and parts of economy that will still need to make use of carbon as a molecule, and therefore also will produce CO2 that we will need to capture in order to keep the climate change in hand.
So that's why we still need the carbon capture and storage anyways, because we also have these products. But then if we look at Shell specifically, so we understand that it's a problem that concerns us all and we have to cooperate in order to get there. But Shell is now investing 1 to 2 billion euros a year. That's, of course, a lot. There are not many companies that are doing that. But how come that it's such a small fraction if you compare it to the other investments that Shell is still making? How come that it's such a huge imbalance?
Yeah, and I think that has to do again with that it's a developing market. Energy transition is only just starting, as I said. We still have to do our electricity, make it sustainable. Then we need to electrify a lot of other energy users. We still have a long way to go. Yeah. If you look at the Netherlands, we all know electric cars, but less than 2% actually has a plug on it. 98% of our cars still need to go to a fuel station. So we're only starting. Yeah. The same is true for Shell. We, of course, are an energy company. We make today's energy happen. Today you can still take a hot shower, but we also want to transition to a sustainable future. It's a small part, like the Netherlands. Yeah. I think if you look at energy intensity, the Netherlands is lagging behind on the world average. Yeah. Shell is lagging behind on the world average, and we both have a speeding up to do. And a company and a commercial company is, in that respect, a reflection of its customers. Yeah. So.
I mean, we see a coffin right there. I guess that people are trying to say that Shell is not quite yet there, and that we need to they need to speed up.
Okay.
I'd like
to maybe continue with the discussion.
Yeah.
Let's do that. We talked about why Shell is still investing in other things, so that they can still provide us with energy today, because that's the reason why you're still investing in other sources. And Shell is investing a lot in natural gases still, because you try to have the energy sources for today, but also for tomorrow. But then again, like why this imbalance? It's still a bit unclear to me. Why it's 1 to 2 billion instead of maybe more.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a developing market, and we have said until 2020 we are learning.
Yeah.
We are really scaling up.
Yeah.
And
so
then
it's more investment in research and development then.
but it's also scaling up. If you look at here the Netherlands, then we have learned a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. When I started in this job, I remember that talking about solar energy, apart from panels at the houses, a lot of people would say solar energy you do around the equator and you actually don't do in the Netherlands. We are now building solar parks in Moerdijk. We are learning the trade. We are going with the projects that are happening. And in that respect, I hope in the Netherlands we can go faster, especially with the ambitious now. I hope that other countries are also picking it up, but that's still a challenge. There are still a lot of other countries that also still have to start. And we are a commercial player in a customer market. We want to take a leading position, but there needs to be a customer for the products.
But you see yourself as a leader in this energy transition.
I think we're an energy company and we want to be an energy leader.
Yeah.
So energy transition is extremely important for our company.
Yeah, and if we then just look at the Netherlands, you say we have to go faster. Also, the Netherlands as a country has to go faster. And what would you then need from the Dutch government besides the climate accord that's now in progress? What would you specifically need to get there faster?
Yeah, we have a year and a half ago formed a coalition with other companies that have the Transition Coalition. At that time, we asked the government to have more bold ambitions. Say we are not afraid of ambitious targets, but put it in law, please. So not every 4 years we get a different political direction. And we want to have climate and economy in one hand, such that if we invest money as the Netherlands, we also get jobs and returns on it. The Transition Coalition has now refreshed their statement and said, okay, we got that part. We're now in the middle of climate and energy agreement discussions. And we would like now the government to go to make the problem, say, first bigger and say, let's make the systems bigger. Let's make really bold choices. Let's go for electrification of those sectors that are not electrical yet. That's major work. If you look at our plants like a refinery in Pernis or a chemical plant in Moerdijk, you can imagine it's a lot of work. So we want bolder choices, clear lines, and we want to have system thinking. So we want to make sure that there's new infrastructure, think about hydrogen, think about electricity, and that's what we ask the government to think about. The other point we ask the government to pick up is that the best thing would be to price CO2. If there would be a high price for CO2, the market would take care of this by itself. But the European ETS price, it's climbing, but it's still small. We want to do nationally something more, but if we do something in the Netherlands, then we make products more expensive in the Netherlands, but then people start buying the products from Germany or Poland. Think about electricity will then come from other. So we need to work together with other countries. We've asked the Dutch government, work please on the European CO2 price, but maybe we can also work together with countries like Germany or Belgium to take another step in acceleration. If we do it together, then we could go faster.
Yes, and I think in terms of cooperation, there's one question that I asked myself. The organization Follow This has actually tried to has released and published reports on how Shell can actually, fasten up the process. However, you say that Shell is actually more flexible and greener than this organization, or than documents that these organizations have published.
Yes.
Yes. And why did you then ask people to lobby against a measure or an organization, or not lobby against, but discourage voting against an organization that is trying to help you cooperate to make a process go faster?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion with Follow This on this as well. I think first of all, the way they had phrased it makes it very inflexible. So it's just a kind of process kind of thing. If you do it the way they want to do it, via a shareholder resolution, it becomes fixed in stone, and you can't say in a few years' time, we need to go faster, we need to go slower. And the other point is that we are moving with our strategy not just only on our own CO2 emissions, but if you really want to change the energy world, we should not think about how much emissions we have from a refinery. We should think about the emissions that are happening when you fuel up your car and you drive your car. We call that scope 3, and we've said in our ambitions we take scope 1, our own CO2 emissions, scope 2, everything we buy, and scope 3, the way our products are used, in 1 as an ambition. Now that was not in the resolution either. So when we saw what they wrote up, we said, we believe we have a better story.
Okay.
So we asked the shareholders to vote for our story.
Sorry,
it's more
can you
ambitious.
go on the stage, please?
You know, I don't mind dialogue.
Me neither. Can someone get this off? Guys? Sorry, we are here, of course, for the dialogue, and your sign is made, your position is made, but let's keep it to the discussion, please. We were talking about Follow This and their resolution.
Yeah, I don't mind making 1 or 2 remarks
Cool.
about, because
Yeah,
I really welcome all opinions, and of course in Amsterdam you don't expect anything else. I would like to extend the invitation again to the people that are having the protest to come and talk to us. We've asked that a few times, and people don't come and don't want to talk to us. So if there's no dialogue, then I can only do with protests. And I must say that I also don't mind protests. I have 2 things, and then I come back.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the protest. Personally, I'm a bit emotional about that one. I went to a funeral yesterday, and I don't think that's very fitting. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
if I we're almost out of time for the interview, so I think we should indeed head to the audience. As I mentioned before, we are here as Room for Discussion. I want to say it one more time, to have a discussion and an open debate. So there's now the opportunity for you to ask a question, and please keep it constructive and concise. Okay. I don't.
The question over there.
Hi. Your Sky scenario shows that you expect to act in line with Paris while still producing almost as much oil and gas in 2040 as you're doing today. By doing that, you're not moving in line with society to meet the Paris goals. Instead, you're locking us into more oil and gas production, and thereby you're putting the Paris goals out of sight. And I think that is very nasty. And next to that, you have the climate ambition to reduce your emission intensity of your products by 50% by 2050. And if we want to have a 50% chance of meeting the 1.5 degree target, so that's only a coin flip chance of meeting the 1.5 degree target, we need to reduce energy emissions to 0 by 2050. So you're not acting in line with Paris, you're threatening the climate targets, and that is endangering the human population and all the species that live on the earth.
And what is then again your question now?
Another question?
Yeah, maybe, and we're going back to the scenario. I agree with you that the ambition should be higher. The question is, can we get everyone to move as fast? I think in the Netherlands, we should do it. So I'm director for the Netherlands. I think we have a task at hand. And in the Netherlands, we need to get going and show that as a developed country that values climate change, we do a much better job than we do now. In every country, though, this debate will be different. So in the Netherlands, we still have to start, we still have to deliver. In other countries, they need to get going as well. And the question is, how do we predict, and that's not just Shell, but how do people predict this will move globally, and how can we move that? There are, in the years ahead, two challenges. Not only the CO2 challenge of how do we reduce our CO2 footprint of our current energy use. There are predictions, and you already referred to that the world population will grow and that they will start to use more energy. So while we want to do a big job of reducing CO2, at the same time we need to provide more energy. If you take that together, then most economic models show that there is not enough renewable energy, even if we try very hard to get that done worldwide by 2050. Now, we have said, if the world moves faster, if we can move faster, we will move as well. If you look at our ambition and our strategy, because Sky scenario is a scenario, but our strategy is a separate discussion. Our strategy shows bold portfolio choices where we're going to invest more in renewables, in electric mobility, in biofuels, and yes, also in nature, because we believe we need these investments as well.
Okay, I think it's time to move on to the next question. Maybe the guy after, yeah.
Yes, I have a question about the pressures for short-term profit. Because scientists working in the fossil fuel industry have been warning about the dangers of fossil fuel burning since the 1960s, or going back even further. And people in positions of power in the industry, like your position, have almost consistently chosen to either ignore these findings or to actively work against the political implications that they entail. How can we credibly believe that you, in a similar position, will make a different choice than your colleagues or predecessors did?
Very good. Like that. I think it's a very personal question to me. I think in the end I can say what I want, but the actions need to show. That's what I try to do, is on one hand do the projects that matter. So in the Netherlands, in the last 2 years, as a team with my directors, we've worked on starting energy transition acceleration also inside Shell, electric mobility becoming bigger, and actually one of the biggest in the Netherlands with the acquisition of New Motion, hydrogen in mobility, solar panels, etc. So I can only convince, I think, my personal beliefs by showing the projects that we can do in the Netherlands. The second part is by using my influence, wherever I have some, in trying to get the parties that are necessary in the Netherlands to work together for this acceleration of energy transition. And I can say again that I think we need a lot of parties, so a lot of companies, governments, institutions, including Shell, to work together, and that the acceleration is doable. I do believe in the 49% minimum in 2030. I think we can get there. It's a major operation. The Netherlands has the money, but we need to start cooperating. We need to start not fighting each other, not seeing each other as competitors, but to build a new market with the economic players that we have in the Netherlands. Now, I'm spending a lot of my time on that, on trying to get that cooperation going and to get those policies in place. My team is spending time in getting the projects in place. I know that I can't convince you by talking more about it, and time will tell if you feel I've done my job well enough.
Okay, I think that we have time for one more question. I see Reinier walking over there. Like, okay, yeah.
Hi. My question is about that you talk about that Shell is a consumer-driven company, that you're dependent on political choices. Now, is one of the scenarios about climate change is not, it's not certain that it will happen, neither is that's sure about yours. But one of the scenarios is that two things will happen: mass political instability and the reduction of the of the number of consumers worldwide quite dramatically. And as I know that a company like Shell likes to play out scenarios and plan everything carefully. So how do you plan for that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. And maybe if you allow me, I would like to actually get back a little bit to the previous question on these big scenarios. What I've learned in the last 2 years, and I've worked for Shell my whole working life, and I've been Dutch my whole life, is that you can analyze a lot, and you can look at things globally, and you can predict a lot in the big picture. But only when you start doing, you start learning. In the last 2 years, we've started, and also internally, with stories what would be impossible or what would be globally happening. And only when you start to work it and you really get into it, you see the possibilities. So I believe our focus should be is to start this together, because we can't really oversee what is coming towards us. We all value that it will be serious, and we want to avoid it. We want to work on it, and I think we need to get going, and to get going we need to start working in a different way. And only when you start going, you start to understand the things a bit better than the global analysis or the global picture. I find it personally hard to comment on those big pictures.
I think one thing that became clear after this interview, because we all almost have to end it due to time constraints, is that you constantly say that we have to do it together, we have to work together to cooperate with companies, so not only Shell, but also other oil and gas companies, energy companies, governments, but also consumers. What can we, as people here in the audience, now concretely do to work towards that goal?
Shell is also, no, all should do it. Shell should do it, and you should do it.
I think the question we are trying to ask is how can we as students, and Shell of course, how can everyone cooperate in order to actually concretely get to or fasten up the pace of the energy transition? So how can we as students also influence, together with Shell, this energy transition?
Maybe we can let Marjan van Loon answer the question, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, I think that first of all, as a citizen, you can do quite a lot yourself. If you think about your CO2 footprint, which is partly also using our products, but you can think about what you eat, where you go on holidays, and how you choose your products. You can choose your work. I hear a lot of people have opinions. Make the change happen from within the organization. Come and help us. I really believe that energy transition is happening not only by the new fresh startups. Yes, we need them, and we need the bright ideas, but it is also happening by transitioning the existing economy. So be a part of that. Make sure that you work on those parts and in those companies that are going to make a difference and that are going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And I do believe these companies are changing, and you can make them change. So, in my view, is don't only comment from the sideline. Come and help.
I think that's a good way to end this interview. Sadly, due to time constraints, we have to round up this interview. So I would like to thank you all for coming, for sharing your opinions, and coming for your interest actually in this interview and this company and the cause or the common cause that we all need to work on, like the climate change. I want to address one more thing, which is that we as Room for Discussion are looking for new interviewers. So if you are a student and you are interested in applying, please come and visit us on Friday at CREA at 5 p.m. or otherwise send your application in before the 20th of September. But for now, please give a warm applause and thanks to Marjan van Loon for coming here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.